other interesting thing happening to the IPL from a sponsorship perspective, Vineet, Mustafa, Manish, Gautam. We used to have the DLFs, the Tatas, the Pepsis. This IPL is almost being taken over by the venture capitalists. If you were to see who the sponsors are, so you have, you know, you have, people who are, fundamentally funded through VCs, whether it's a Dream 11 and an academy. How do you look at this change?
It's an interesting change, Brunmay, because we always say, I mean, from a pure play business standpoint, always, I mean, a company driven by shareholders and a company driven by private equity. I mean, that's pretty much the conversation, right? And obviously, a company which is driven by private equity, it looks at valuations, look at a different level of scale, which a property like IPL will give them instantly. And people who are driven by a shareholder kind of companies are more of an established companies who would look at more of a scientific approach, more of a long-term view, more of a sustained kind of a spends and stuff like that. So for the time that we are in terms of, we are in the middle of pandemic right now, and it's not surprising at all to see some of the categories in the gaming sector, or in the edutech sector, or in even the e-commerce sector, are the prime guys who are taking positions ahead of the traditional advertisers, right? So I mean, that's not surprising at all, because we are an economy which is growing economy from a completely new age consumption standpoint, right?
Correct. So Mrunmoy, I think it is not a VC question, honestly. It is not a traditional question. It's a function of very simple, where you are in the evolution of India's online internet market, right? When I was in Levers, it was a very, very tiny online internet market, 2006. Fast forward 15 years, you're talking about 500 million smartphone users, which is a considerable amount of thing. And then you're talking about, like you explained about awareness, interest, desire, action. That's a very FMCG model of learning, which all of us learned in our MBA schools. Now, as the internet really happens, first phase happens about building some kind of engagement, which builds enduring relationships and then takes you retention and thing. Once you've got that phase of consumer retention engagement right in your product, now you have to kind of increase your reach and penetration of those categories. You need to go to mainstream media, and you need to kind of really use those vehicles to advertise yourself. And I think the rate of growth of the consumer internet brands is much, much faster, and which is really compared to traditional offline, which are growing at 10%, 15%, 12%, which is a great number. And versus here, you're talking about doubling every year kind of a number, right? So the pace of growth is what is very different, because the consumer consumption has increased a lot on the consumer online internet businesses. And if you were to look at 2010-11, it was e-commerce, and then you had some, you have delivery guys, you had shared economy guys, and now you're having an education guys, you have gaming guys. So when we used to look at online internet, there will be one or two categories which will have that kind of penetration. Now today, a consumer, all of us are consumers, we are consuming 10, 15 categories on a single day, which means that that kind of penetration of internet has increased, time spent on internet has increased, which is leading to new brands which is emerging, right? And to kind of propel that growth, you are now going mainstream, and from a Dream 11 point of view, they would have spent X amount of money already on the advertising with Star and Hotstar and other channels. Now, it's a very prudent discussion that if I were to spend that much money versus I put in a sponsorship of IPL, which takes me into those many I reach, more saliency of that, I am better off, right? So the scale of advertising is already there, happening with the consumer internet companies. And now IPL, as in the initial part we discussed, it's a great Mahakumbhaya, if I may say, where entire families come together, community comes together. It's a very, very great buy for a brand which is already spending. And so if you see more and more consumer internet brands being created because of the growth, because of the revenue scale, right? You will continue to see those sponsorships and into off-mainstream properties being hogged by the consumer internet companies. Today, you may be seeing that they are propelled by VC, but tomorrow you will see that funding is coming from their own balance sheets. like Byju's Food is profitable and it will continue to be driving more profitability going on. So balance sheet funding will follow, but then there'll be some other category which will emerge, which will be growing faster, because the balance sheet funding, when it happens, you will obviously hit a certain amount of, the base effect will start kicking in. So in my opinion, we are in a very, very early stage of consumer internet economy in India. And next 10, 15 years, you will see many categories being created and many new brands being emerged.
Yeah, no, I think you're making a very important, sorry, Mustafa. I think that you're making an important point, Manish. What was essentially the real world as we knew it, which was traditional media, traditional distribution channels, traditional consumption patterns, has transformed or translated into a mix. So there is virtual media, virtual delivery of services and products consumed virtually. That is a space which is absolutely new, and it is growing by leaps and bounds.
Actually, it's not consumed virtually; it's the access virtually.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and that's what I'm trying to say, Manish. That it is not only the awareness is not only built virtually, the delivery is also virtual, and the consumption is virtual. Therefore, your balance sheet is also dependent on the delivery that is happening virtually. Over and above that, there is also real world, like you said, you started your career at Unilever. You have products which would not be sold virtually, but it's not only being sold virtually, it is delivered by platforms which primarily have virtual models and being consumed directly at home. So you are actually skipping a lot of steps. This is creating multiple levels of newer economy opportunities, which are taking over, and those are the guys who have the money to spend. They are looking at vertical scale up, and the IPL is a fantastic platform to reach the maximum number of households. You're absolutely right there. Mustafa, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally agree with Manish, but it's not a VC versus corporate India type of a discussion, but
Correct.
Also who has benefited the most over these last 5-6 months, and which businesses have grown the most over these last 5-6 months. I mean, and I think Vineet can back me on this. If we were having a similar conversation with a Dream 11 for a title sponsorship of the IPL in February or March, they probably would not have looked at it with such aggression as they have right now. And similar to the Unacademies and the My Circles and Mobile Premier League, they weren't looking at it because we've had such conversations with them, and their budgets were much, much smaller. So yes, they have grown substantially over these last 5-6 months of lockdown, which while the conventional businesses have struggled greatly. And that's why in our case we've seen a Daikin having to pull out because they've had no sales all through summer. And advertising for air conditions in October, November for an event being played in Dubai just doesn't make sense for them. So it is a combination of things. And yes, we did see the e-commerce platforms spend big a few years ago. We saw mobile handsets spend big thereafter, and now we're seeing the online gaming and academy platforms spending big now. So we'll see what's up next.
No, I think just to maybe make it elevate it a little bit, I think, frankly, as a broadcaster, the more the merrier. So of course we are happy, but I think if you take a little bit higher level view, I think the way I think about it is that Manish is exactly right. It's a 10-15 year journey and new categories will emerge, but it increases the competitive space demand. It also creates comfort level. When more and more people are spending on a category just by the virtue of that momentum, more people start looking at those categories because some of these are big ticket items. Now, not all sports are IPL. Other sports are more modest in their sponsorship requirements because they're not as big as IPL. But it introduces sports to a category of spenders, which then can cascade to other forms of sports, not just the biggest sport that exists in cricket and IPL. But more importantly, what it does, and you've seen this, I'm sure all of you in different ways, when sports get funded, franchises get funded, athletes get more money, the ecosystem around the athletes get built, sort of a sponsorship for players, badminton, which has come up in the last few years, few players making lots of money. The culture of sports in this country increases because now, for the first time, parents see that their kids may have a future, not just as athletes, because there are leagues, so you don't have to be only in the national team, but in all the surround things around what athletes require today, health, fitness, wellness, data analytics. So I think over 10 years, as more money comes into sports, the nuances of that and the impact of that at the grassroots, I think will be very different and very exciting.